The sale of the Boston Celtics has been finalized, and it marks the beginning of a chapter that even the most seasoned observers of the NBA could not have imagined unfolding in such dramatic fashion. On a Tuesday that will be remembered for decades, private equity magnate Bill Chisholm officially assumed control of the most decorated franchise in basketball, taking the reins from the group led by W.Y.C. Grousbeck, who had been the steward of this team for over 20 years. This was not just a transaction, it was a declaration that the very landscape of professional sports ownership has changed forever. The Celtics were put on the market in the summer of last year, not as a franchise in crisis, but as one standing at the absolute peak of its glory, fresh off securing their 18th NBA championship, a record that redefined the meaning of dynasty. For Chisholm, the timing could not have been more symbolic. To purchase a team that had just solidified its supremacy was not a mere business maneuver. It was a message to every fan, rival, and investor watching that the Celtics are not entering a period of transition, but rather one of unprecedented ambition. In March, Chisholm won the bidding war with an offer that stunned even hardened industry insiders. His valuation of the franchise surpassed $6.1 billion United States dollars, a number that shattered previous records for professional sports teams in America. But the shock does not come from a price alone. It comes from what it signals. To value the Celtics at such a staggering figure is to recognize not only their past glory, but also their potential to dominate the future of basketball in ways that stretch beyond the court. This is not just about ticket sales or TV contracts. It is about global expansion, digital platforms, emerging markets, and the untapped influence of a brand that has become synonymous with greatness. The NBA's Board of Governors did not hesitate, approving the deal unanimously last week. That kind of consensus is rare in any league decision, but in this case, it was inevitable. When the money officially changed hands on Tuesday, it was more than a transfer of ownership. It was the formal start of a new experiment that could redefine what it means to own a sports franchise in the 21st century. Chisholm now controls at least 51% of the franchise, with guaranteed full control through the year 2028. His commitment could raise the total value of the deal to an extraordinary $7.3 billion United States dollars. This is the highest amount ever paid for a team across the four major American sports leagues. To put this in perspective, even when a portion of the Los Angeles Lakers was sold earlier this summer at a valuation that suggested the entire franchise was worth $10 billion, that did not eclipse the sheer historical resonance of this Celtics sale. Because while the Lakers may represent glamour, the Celtics represent legacy, and legacy carries a weight that money cannot easily measure. What makes this moment even more astonishing is the scale of growth when viewed against the history of the team. In 2002, W.Y.C. Grousbeck led a group that purchased the Celtics for $360 million, a figure that at the time seemed ambitious, but now looks almost symbolic compared to the multi-billion-dollar valuation of today. Under his leadership, the Celtics won 2 NBA titles, appeared in 2 other finals, and reached the playoffs in 20 out of 23 seasons. But beyond the statistics, Grousbeck restored a sense of stability and continuity to a franchise that always carried the burden of expectation. His era may now be closing, but it closes with the team back on top, leaving fans not with a sense of loss, but with anticipation for what is to come. And this is where the true mystery lies, the part that fuels the curiosity gap and leaves every fan asking the same question. Why would someone pay such an astronomical price at this precise moment? And what does he see that others have not yet understood? Chisholm did not spend billions simply to maintain the status quo. He is stepping into a franchise with global resonance at a time when the NBA is aggressively expanding its international footprint, especially in regions like Asia and Europe, where basketball is no longer just entertainment, but cultural influence. For a private equity magnate, this is more than a team. It is a platform that can generate exponential growth through technology, streaming rights, merchandising innovation, and partnerships that will take the Celtics brand to corners of a world it has not yet fully reached. But there is an even deeper element to this move, one that extends into the psychology of competition. Owning the Boston Celtics is not like owning any other team. It is not a passive investment, it is an inheritance of responsibility. To buy the Celtics is to insert yourself into a lineage of legends, to take on the weight of Russell, Bird, Havlicek, Garnett, Pierce, and the many who built the culture of banners hanging from the rafters. Chisholm knows this, and his decision to embrace this burden at such a staggering cost tells us that he is not afraid of expectation. He is fueled by it. That is what gives fans reason to believe this is not just a continuation of success, but the beginning of something that could redefine dominance. The numbers themselves tell part of the story, but they are only the surface. $6,100,000,000, $7,300,000,000. These are values that capture headlines, but the true value of this purchase lies in what cannot yet be calculated. The Celtics are not just a sports team, they are a cultural asset with the power to shape narratives, inspire movements, and capture the imagination of future generations. When a new owner steps in with resources and vision on this scale, is not just a financial transaction, is a recalibration of what the next decade of basketball could look like. Fans may be asking what this means for the roster, the coaching staff, or the long-term structure of the organization. The truth is, those answers will come in time, and they may come in ways that surprise even the most attentive insiders. What we know now is that Bill Chisholm did not purchase this team to remain in the shadows of its history. He purchased it to expand that history into territory that has never been imagined. And that, perhaps, is the most exciting part. The sale of the Celtics does not represent an ending. It represents a door opening to possibilities that stretch far beyond what the scoreboard can show. The question is not whether the Celtics will continue to contend for championships. That much feels inevitable given their foundation. The question is how this new ownership era will redefine what it means to be a champion, not just in basketball, but in global sports. The story unfolding in Boston is one of those rare turning points in NBA history when the outside world sees only decline, but the inner circle understands transformation. A little over 14 months ago, the Boston Celtics lifted the trophy and silenced every critic. Yet today, national voices call their offseason the worst of all 30 franchises. At first glance, that may sound damning, but if we dig deeper, a very different narrative begins to emerge, one that is not about collapse, but about the deliberate construction of a second act in a dynasty. The label of worst offseason was attached by David Aldridge of The Athletic, who argued that the second apron restrictions struck Boston like a hammer, cutting off familiar names and forcing painful exits. He pointed out the departures of Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, and Luke Kornet, claiming the Celtics had been pushed into an identity crisis. His words suggest gloom, but history tells us that every great dynasty faces a moment when it must shed its skin to survive, and Boston has chosen to do it sooner rather than later. To understand why, we must return to the financial reality of the modern NBA. The second apron is not just a number on a spreadsheet, it is a wall designed to keep teams from sustaining super rosters. For Boston, the cost of staying together would have meant tens of millions of dollars in punitive taxes, strangling flexibility for years to come. Rather than fall into that trap, Brad Stevens and the front office made the bold choice to pivot, accepting short-term turbulence to unlock long-term dominance. This is not a retreat, it is a recalibration, and only those looking beyond the next season will recognize the significance. Critics highlight Jayson Tatum's Achilles injury as the symbol of Boston's uncertainty. The superstar is not expected to return until the 2026-27 season, and the absence of his brilliance has been described as a death sentence for the team's competitiveness. Yet when a franchise as historic as the Celtics loses its cornerstone, it often discovers new voices ready to rise. Jaylen Brown has already proven he can carry a heavier load. Derek White has developed into one of the most versatile guards in the league, and the arrival of Anthony Simons introduces a dynamic scorer who has never been surrounded by this level of structure. The story of Boston without Tatum is not a tragedy, it is an audition for the supporting cast to prove they can be more than supporting. The argument that Boston has been left barren overlooks the strategic layering of young talent. Hugo Gonzalez, drafted as a wing with high two-way potential, represents not just a piece for depth, but a commitment to the future. Luka Garza, while criticized for not matching the pedigree of Porzingis, brings a different skill set that can flourish in a system that values spacing and resilience. These are not headline-grabbing names, but every dynasty has been built on contributions from underestimated players who grew into essential figures. The temptation to measure Boston only by what it lost ignores the seeds of what it is planting. And then there is the question that no critic has fully explored. What if Boston is not simply holding on until Tatum returns, but preparing to strike the moment he does? The organization could have tried to patch holes and chase one more run in 2025, but instead it chose to create financial and roster flexibility. By the summer of 2026, the Celtics will not only welcome back their superstar, they will have the assets, the cap structure, and the draft picks to reload aggressively. That is not the profile of a team fading into irrelevance. It is the blueprint of a team preparing for another era of dominance. The ranking of 29th out of 30 in offseason performance, with only the Golden State Warriors graded lower due to an incomplete evaluation, is more headline than substance. Aldridge himself admits that Golden State could surpass Boston once Jonathan Kuminga's situation is resolved. But even if Boston holds a bottom spot in such rankings, one must ask, how often has the so-called worst offseason later been remembered as the start of a great turnaround? History is full of examples where temporary setbacks forged stronger futures. Consider the psychology of a fan base and a roster that has already tasted championship glory. There is no hunger like the hunger to repeat, and there is no resilience like that of a team that has already climbed the mountain. Critics may call the current Celtics a shadow of their 2024 championship selves, yet shadows are cast only by something standing in the light. The Celtics remain in that light, biding their time, adjusting their shape, preparing to reveal a form that could surprise everyone who has written them off. This is the real curiosity of Boston's so-called disastrous offseason. What appears to be dismantling is in fact the laying of foundation. What looks like a pause is actually preparation. And when the moment arrives, when Tatum returns to join Brown, White and whichever allies emerge,